Hello, my name is Paul Remillard. I work with the Florida Bar. For the next hour or so, we'll be discussing professionalism. The reason we'll be discussing professionalism is because several surveys indicate that perhaps the profession has a problem. In a recent ABA survey, reports showed that lawyers nationwide are following their rules of professional conduct much more stringently, although the public perception of lawyers is steadily declining. In a national survey of lawyers and their practice, the statistics indicated that lawyers are much more dissatisfied with the practice of law, and in fact, many are leaving the practice of law. In a recent survey of Florida lawyers, the information indicated that lawyers are dissatisfied with the behavior of other lawyers to a point which they believe that winning has replaced justice in the practice of law in Florida in many cases. Today is November 6, 1996. Yesterday, President Bill Clinton was reelected. Today, we're in Washington, D.C. at the Department of Justice, and we are privileged to have the Honorable Janet Reno, the Attorney General of the United States, as our guest to discuss professionalism. Janet Reno graduated from Harvard Law School at the top of her class. She soon became a partner in private practice at Steele, Hector & Davis in Miami. Later, she became the state attorney and was the state attorney for the 11th Judicial Circuit in Miami for several years. She was then appointed the Attorney General of the United States and has been for the last 4 years. As a point of interest, I was assigned and hired by the office in Dade County and worked for Janet Reno as an assistant state attorney. On our first day of employment, she came to speak to all of the new attorneys, and she told us, among other things, that it was her wish that 99 guilty people would go free instead of one innocent person going to jail. Clearly, what she wanted us to know is that justice and fair play should be a major portion in our priorities as prosecutors. I hope you will enjoy the conversation that we're going to have with Ms. Reno as much as I will. First of all, Ms. Reno, thank you very much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk to the Florida Bar and its lawyers about professionalism. Everywhere you've gone, you've had a positive impact on lawyers and the people that you've dealt with in general. What's the philosophy that sort of guides you or gives you the foundation for how you practice law and how you live your life?
I think the law should be used to serve the people, to help them live together without friction and conflict, to give people the opportunity to do their very best and to live up to their fullest potential. And I try to use the law that way in what I do.
You know, there's been a lot of talk, especially in the last several months, about ethics versus professionalism. And in some of my opening remarks, I made reference to an ABA survey where we're following our rules more as lawyers, but people are thinking less of us. Do you think there's a difference between ethics and professionalism?
I think that in some way that's a matter of words. I think the ethics of a lawyer require that the lawyer do their very best for their client as honestly as they can. So in that sense, ethics and professionalism are the same. But you can comply with the ethical rules and maybe not be as thorough as possible. You may comply with the ethical rules, but not talk to your client and understand your client's problem and work to solve your client's problem on a long-range basis. The professionalism asks that the lawyer go to the fullest extent possible to serve their client the right way.
And that's pretty much the way you asked us to serve our clients, which was the state, as prosecutors back in Dade County when I worked for you.
Well, you all had such tremendous caseloads. You did an incredible job under very difficult circumstances. And I think, again, it shows that it's not just a matter of resources. It's a matter of commitment, of dedication, of putting people first, of looking at that victim, or even the defendant, and saying, now, wait a minute, before I charge this person, I've got to make sure that I've got the evidence to prove him or her guilty. Talking to the victim, instead of just making that person a number, looking at that person as a real person who had a terrible thing happen to them and working with them to try to make them whole again.
And that always made a difference, especially in Dade County, where victims didn't even want to be involved in the system. If you talk to them, if you sort of do what more than you have to do, it makes a difference in how they feel about the office and how they feel about our profession.
Well, I think it's incumbent upon all lawyers, I think, too many of us as prosecutors felt we won the battle when we got a conviction, not realizing that we didn't have enough prison cells to house people for the length of time the judges were sentencing them, or not realizing that we were not taking effective action to interrupt the cycle of crime that this person had experienced. The public defender too often feels he's won the battle when he wins a motion to suppress or a motion to dismiss, not recognizing that his client has a terrible drug problem which he can't afford medical care for. We've got to look beyond the arena of the courtroom or the particular transaction in which we're involved and try to serve our client and society in the most complete way possible.
In that vein, the profession has changed. You know, as you know, I haven't been a lawyer all my career, and I guess I never learned that win at all cost attitude, which it seems like what you're referring to now. But the profession seems to have changed a little bit, where the adversity or the adversarial nature of the battle sometimes eclipses justice. Do you feel it's changed in that regard?
I started practicing law in Miami in 1963. And I can tell you there were some great adversaries and splendid advocates. They were adversaries in the best sense of the word, but they were gentlemen. Most of them were gentlemen at the time. And I see in more recent years certainly a greater lack of civility on the part of lawyers, and I think this hurts the profession.
Do you think the lawyers, as a consequence of their profession, as a consequence of they have a license to practice law, that their clients have, quote-unquote, trust in them, that they have a certain role to play in society?
Oh, I think lawyers can be the most important people in society. It has been so rewarding for me to see the newly independent states of Eastern Europe, of Central Europe emerging, trying to figure out how they reweave the fabric of community and civility around societies that had lived in totalitarian states, and to see the role that lawyers play in making this happen, to see the role that lawyers can play in these newly independent states in bringing order to a community, in bringing peace to a community. It is so exciting. And if we as lawyers in this country looked at our role, not just for how many billable hours we have, not how much money we make, not how many cases we win, but how we help that person whom we are representing, or that the state, how we can make that person more self-sufficient, more able to cope with the problems of the world. Lawyers can have wonderful impact in a community.
And then consequently give them a dose of the system that's not necessarily negative. Understand that it can work.
Well, one of the points that's been so encouraging to me, I've been Attorney General for a little over 3.5 years, and I've had a chance to meet with lawyers all across the country. There's some bad lawyers, like there are bad people in other professions, but I am so proud of so many lawyers across this country, lawyers that are contributing pro bono services, lawyers that are taking special cases, lawyers that are championing the person who needs help. It is really exciting, and I think lawyers shouldn't be too defensive about the public opinion of them, because I've heard an awful lot of people say, my lawyer made a difference.
Well, how do we get the news to those who are apparently bringing us down? Would you think the law schools need to play a particular role in that?
I think the law schools can play an important role, and one of the suggestions I've made to the law schools is that negotiation and conflict resolution should become a part of the curriculum of every law school in the same way that trial advocacy may be part of the curriculum. You'll recall that most of the cases we resolve in a prosecutor's office are resolved by negotiation, because we don't have enough time to try all the cases. There's not enough courtroom time if we work around the clock. Yet we teach people how to try a case. We don't teach them how to negotiate a case to produce a result in the best interest of all concerned. We teach people how to wire a deal, but we don't teach them how to negotiate together. And so I think that would be a good beginning. How you keep your client out of court, how you estimate the value of a case so you know that it makes far better sense to settle it up front and your client will be far better off. I think that's one step. I think some law schools are developing community programs that combine not just pro bono service on the part of the law student, but an understanding of the community and how it works so that the lawyer can participate on an ongoing basis after graduation in issues of children and poverty,
Right.
of housing problems. There's so much that a lawyer can do if they understand some of the rudiments of it.
Well, I found that, you know, at the bar, they allow me to do pro bono work. And it's been the most meaningful work I've done since I left the office of the prosecutor in Dade County, because you get back with real people, they're in conflict. And if you can mediate, I do some mediation as well. And the mediation process is much like that. Bring them in so they don't have to get fully involved in the system. And then they leave. They've had lawyers on both sides who have helped them get it resolved without running up their bills or without getting them into court, where, you know, all heck breaks loose sometimes.
I give you an example. I bet there are an awful lot of lawyers that have walked into their accountant with an audit notice from the IRS, and they're terrified. They don't know what to do. They're thinking it's going to be a nightmare. And the accountant says, well, bring me this, 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 and this. He sits down with you for 15 minutes, says, let's do this, this, and this. I'll call the IRS person now. Calls him, works it all out. It's done, over with. And you look at him and think he's the best thing that's happened to you.
Right.
That's what we should.
Conflict.
That's what we should be doing, is solving people's problems. The other thing I think that lawyers must do is focus on how we deliver legal services to people of low and income and to the working poor. The American Bar Association estimates that maybe 70 to 80% of those people don't have access to lawyers. That means that for a significant number of Americans, the law is worth little more than the paper it's written on. We've got to make the law real for those people, and that will give public confidence to the legal system.
Absolutely. What do you think about judges? I mean, we saw all the shenanigans that went on in the O.J. Simpson case, so I don't want to go into that because I think that's an aberration. But, you know, in courtrooms every day, lawyers seem to go awry of the spirit of the process. Do you think judges should be a little bit more proactive?
I don't know quite what you mean by the word proactive, but I think one of the great traits that a judge can have is that judge who has command of the courtroom. Command of the courtroom to ensure timeliness, to ensure civility, to ensure a proper presentation of the case. It's almost an art. You can spot the judge who has that ability to control the courtroom, and everyone has such respect and admiration for her or for him. So I think that's important. I think judges, too, can, however, reach beyond the bounds of their courtroom. I've been so impressed to see what so many members of the judiciary are doing, for example, in the development of domestic violence centers and focusing on issues that have a spillover from the courtroom into the community. And when judges look at the whole picture, they can make such a significant contribution.
How about the system of justice? Not particularly with your department or whatever, but just the system of justice in general. Are there any sort of tweaks that you would hope that we could make, say, if you had the power to do that?
Well, it's a lot more than a tweak that's necessary to ensure justice for all of those people who today cannot afford lawyers. To do that, we've got to increase opportunities for pro bono service. We've got to look at ways that we can enhance and strengthen our legal services corporation. We've got to look at what other means we can undertake to ensure that all people are properly represented. One of the points that I've often considered, I'll walk into a public housing project. A lady will have a welfare problem, and she's going to have more of those problems now. She'll have problems dealing with the HUD management, and she won't know who to go to. There'll be nobody that can represent her because legal services has a caseload that's so huge that they can't get to her problem. And there'll be some lawyers at that meeting because they want to volunteer. The lawyers don't understand the housing problems. They don't understand the welfare law. And what I keep thinking is that there might be a new concept of a person licensed to do community advocacy who in a 4-year college degree learns some of the specific problems faced by people of low income who can't afford a lawyer. better that we get them a community advocate who can work through the bureaucracy to get their questions answered than to leave them in the frustration that so many of them experience today. Now, I mentioned that at an American Bar Association meeting, and I got a real mean letter from a president of a state bar association saying, those are jobs that lawyers should have. And I said, that's fine if lawyers will only take them, but no lawyer wants the job.
Right.
And so I think working together with proper supervision and proper training, we can do so much more to provide people with the opportunity for legal services.
Do you think lawyers, just to take that rabbit trail a little bit, do you think the lawyers are too preoccupied with the billable hour and on the opposite side of the scale, preoccupied with whether or not legal assistants or others who are allowing services to go to those who can't afford lawyers? You think that's a problem with that preoccupation?
I think there are some lawyers that are preoccupied with the billable hours and with how much money they make, and they don't want anybody to take their business, but they only want paying business. And we have got to look beyond just the dollars of the law to the people who the law was meant to serve. One of the points that has intrigued me, as I came to Washington, I heard from law school classmates, many of whom had gone to some of the best firms in the country, had had very successful careers, had done very well. And I found almost touchingly that some of them were envious of my opportunities at public service because the law had not been as fulfilling as it might have been. I think we can do so much if we think of different times in our career, public service at some point, private practice at another, go back to public service. With life expectancy what it is today, a lawyer can have so many wonderful experiences and increase her or his opportunity to serve the people.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Some of the surveys indicate, I was reading a book, it's called In Search of Atticus Finch, and in that book it has a survey. Within the survey is that a lot of lawyers, practicing lawyers making several $100,000 a year, are leaving the practice of law because they're frustrated with that practice. And myself, being in business before I went to law school and then working with your office in Dade County and handling literally thousands of cases, I get the same sort of feedback from lawyers who have just been in private firms like Steele Hector, Holland and Knight, the big firms in Florida, where they really and truly have never been in county court. They've never negotiated a plea in a jury room with a defendant there and a lawyer there, and they've missed what I consider the flavor of the law that you can't get unless you're in public service. That's a wonderful idea, that perhaps we could sort of bifurcate our careers. But, it seems, though, that with this preoccupation with money, that seems to be an impediment.
Well, it's important, again, to understand, because these are people that want to figure out how they get their children off to college and how they pay for children's college education and how they provide for security in old age, particularly as we live longer. And those are all critical questions, particularly as more people are making more money and more people are making less money, and that middle class in America sometimes gets stretched thin. But you can make enough money to do that and still have time to do public service and still have time to contribute to the community. And it is so exciting to see the lawyers across the country and in my own state that do so much outside their practice for their community with their legal abilities.
We have something in Tallahassee which I think you've endorsed. I brought some material with me. It's called the Neighborhood Justice Center, and it's run by a non-lawyer, but they're going to try to bring some criminal cases from county court out to be mediated, perhaps, before they actually get into the system. The event happens, and instead of going to the county court, they go to the Justice Center and try to work them out with a mediator.
What I hope can happen with courts like that, because I think that's a wonderful beginning, and I noticed in the Florida Bar Journal yesterday, I guess, that I received an article on it. Just think about what we can do if we expand the concept of community justice. Take a neighborhood with a high incidence of delinquency and domestic violence. Figure out what the caseload is. Assign one judge in that neighborhood with community police officers, community probation officers. Have the city assign an ombudsman to work with the court on needed services. And you can address so many problems. The abandoned lot that never gets mowed and causes the neighborhood so many
Really?
problems. The
Yeah.
ombudsman, they'd come into the court, Your Honor, I can't get the lawn, the weeds down. The ombudsman would go do it. Lady would come in, I can't, my son is 18, he's pleading to get some drug treatment, but I can't afford it. Work through it. If there are issues, well, you better not talk about it. Public defender would be there, a community prosecutor, community public defender, working with citizens to identify problems, develop priorities, and to solve the problems that cause the issues in the first place. You could develop in that court, because with automation we can do so much. So you didn't have to go downtown to get child support. You could have your child
Right.
support hearing right there. And you might not have to have a hearing. You might be able to mediate what was due and what was not due and what should be paid and what shouldn't be paid right there.
Great idea.
There's so much
Like
that
a little,
can be done.
little system within a system.
Well, I
I mean,
think
you can always go back to the other system if it doesn't work.
back to how our system really got started, and I forget the year the jury system was supposed to have been founded, sometime in the year 11 or 1200. And I can see some people sitting on a hill in England, and somebody has punched somebody else. And who started it? He started it. No, you started it. Well, we'll get 6 of you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You all hear it, and you all decide it. And that was in a community where people knew the people who were judging the case. There was confidence in the process. The danger, of course, is that as you get back to community justice, it gets into a cronyism. So you have to
Hometown.
balance it. But I'm convinced that if we work at it the right way and can use old ideas with new ideas, we can make community justice serve the people.
And you'd even have that connection between the system and the neighborhood, more so that you know someone is a potential repeat offender, and for the right reasons, get that person help. It's a great idea. From a standpoint of an overall role in society, do you think the lawyers need to play a certain role?
I think the lawyers need to use the law to serve the people. If I represent a corporation, I should worry about how I can most effectively help that corporation. If the corporation tells me it wants to do something that's going to undermine the environment, I've got to say, wait a minute, that's not in anybody's best interest to do that. Why can't we work it out this way? You'll be able to handle this transaction and put in this new facility while at the same time providing environmental protections, instead of saying, okay, now let me see how I can get around these laws
Right.
to enable them to do it. And if we use the law to serve people in their long-range interest, I think the law can be a mighty tool.
I agree. One final question. I know your time is tight. If a new law student just graduated, passed the bar, and got sworn in, came and asked you in private, what's the most important quality that he or she should have entering the legal profession? What quality, how would you answer that question?
I would say that anyone who ever came in contact with you during your time in the practice of law, that every person should know that they can trust what you tell them, what you represent to them, as being true. And my second trait would be prepared.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.